purpose of this video is to show how I fabricated a portable generator shed. There are many YouTube videos on how people have done this. Many have used plastic resin sheds, others built their own from scratch. This video is to show the build specifications that I used, using many ideas from people that have posted their thoughts and results on YouTube. The inventory list for my build is in the comment section, so you can see where I bought almost everything down to every washer, and this ought to be a big help for folks that might be interested in how to fabricate this. The first thing you should do before assembling your shed is figure out where you're going to put it in your yard and ensure that you have a nice solid pad for it. In my case, I cannibalized part of the planter at the rear end of our yard next to my existing big shed. And I used paver stones, 4 across, 3 deep, and created a pad that was just large enough with a little extra to spare to hold the shed. I also got some pond gravel that I put around the rear of the shed and the sides of the shed just to help with erosion control, and then also on the gas exhaust. I had some extra paver stones I just laid down there and had the gravel just to help with heat management that's leaving the shed from the generator exhaust. Once you have your foundation ready to go, you can build the shed and assemble it, and you should see something like this, at least for the shed model that I picked, which was a Suncast model. You can see the details in the inventory list. So here's a shed in the custom configuration that I came up with. I had 4 major requirements to fulfill. One was sound management, insulation on the sides, rubber on the floor, insulation on the ceiling. Second was exhaust management, safely exiting the hot gases from the generator out of the shed so that the resin wall of the shed is not compromised or risk melting. Third is fresh airflow to manage the generator heat itself by providing fresh air across and out of the shed so that the shed doesn't overheat. And then radiant protection from the plastic walls from the heat generated when the generator's running. And then the fourth was critter protection. Here in Texas, we've got lots of big insects and critters that like to get into everything, so making sure that nothing can get in through the exhaust port, around the seams, around the joints of the cutouts that were made for the vents. So everything's been caulked up and sealed up. So we're heat protected, we're sound protected, we're exhaust gas protected, and we're critter protected. In the comments, I have a step-by-step procedure of the recommended order of doing things so that your build goes pretty smoothly if you choose a method like this, or exactly like this, or a derivation of this. I'd like to go over the kill mat on the roof. This is automotive insulation for sound deadening, and I went this route because I saw it on one of the YouTube videos, and I just kind of liked it. I thought it looked a lot better, and because you could extend the soundproofing over the braces, and I liked it. The one downside is it makes it a little bit heavier, where the struts on the corners can't hold up the weight of the shed. So if you start putting the insulation here and you go up, row by row, and then once you get up to this top row up here, that's when the weight starts to become too much for the gas struts, and they can't hold up the shed. Now you could go with a heavier duty gas strut, but I kind of went another route where I simply had some extra sprinkler PVC pipe in my shed, my other shed, not this one, and I just cut it to length, and it fits perfectly in the hole right above the bracket. And there's a little notch down here for this big brace. When it closes, it makes a perfect brace. So when your brace is up, you don't risk knocking it out and have the lid come down when you don't want it to. In addition, I've got these little hooks. You can get like a 4-pack from Home Depot. I just stuck them in between the hex bolt and the washer that was normally holding on the insulation. Got a twofer out of it, because now when I store the braces, I have them there in the door, so when you're opening up the shed and holding the lid up, you could just quickly reach right down there and put the brace in, and you're good to go. So everything's easy to get to. A note about the rubber matting. This is from Tractor Supply. This is what they use for horse stalls. This is 3/4 inch, and you can't really get anything this heavy duty at a decent price at a big box. This stuff's pretty cool. It comes in a 4x6 sheet, and I cut it so it would fit into the floor. It doesn't fit in perfectly. I didn't want it to. I just wanted room, a gap there where things could aerate if it ever got wet in here for some reason. And this should help reduce any vibration from the generator, because when these things run, they really rattle. And the goal here is to reduce vibration and sound. Not soundproof it, but just reduce the decibel levels, which we'll do a test later on in this video. As you're assembling the shed, what I did in the cutouts is I put in foam. I bought 1 can of fireproof foam, which I used in the hole that I drilled out for the gimbal. So when you have the hole, there's a hollow cavity between the inner and outer wall of the shed walls. And what I did is I ran a bead of foam all the way around and sealed it up. That way any residual heat doesn't penetrate into the wall of the shed and risk melting it. And it also helps keep sound from resonating in the hollow space between the inner and outer shed walls. So it didn't take much to do down by the thimble area in the walls, so I used the rest to seal up the exhaust fan cutout. And you could see in there where the walls sealed up, where the cutout was for the vent. In regards to the exhaust, the kit that I used to extend the exhaust from the generator muffler, I have the shroud of the muffler off because the kit comes with a sleeve. On mine Westinghouse 9500 dual feed, that sleeve does not fit. It's too small, but it may fit most generators perfectly according to the reviews. My dad is putting it on his metal lathe and turning out the inner diameter of the sleeve so it could slide over this nipple, and then this hose just clamps to the extension adapter. I wrapped the flex hose with titanium exhaust wrap, and that'll help manage the heat here so it doesn't overheat inside the shed while the generator's running. And this pipe just extends through to the tip of the outer exhaust tube down here. You might be able to see it in there, not sure. Cable management's another thing I had to account for. The 50 amp cable that I have, those 50 amp cable male plugs are huge, and they will not fit through a 5-inch circle. My first attempt was to use a cable hatch like you'd see on the side of an RV, but it was not big enough a diameter for me to fit the male end of the cable through. So the solution, which I saw from a guy on YouTube, is he came up with this blast gate. for these, especially the 50 amp cable users. You know, folks with a 30 amp cable could probably get by with a normal RV hatch, but the advantage of this 6-inch circle is not only can you fit the plug for your male 50 amp plug that I'm going to use, you could also use other extension cords too if you needed to, and they would actually fit through this gate as well. You could stuff a whole bunch of cables through here depending on what your application was for the generator power. And the disadvantage of the RV hatch is you could basically fit one cable through it and close the hatch. In this case, you could just lower the hatch depending on how much space you need for the cable. You can't close it completely, but at this stage of the game, I don't think critters or insects are going to want to fly in here when that generator is running. Another little tip you could try is this Duravent double-walled pipe. To get short lengths are very, very expensive. You could get like a 24-inch length at Home Depot for like 18 bucks. If you try to buy a specialty size like 4, 6, or 8 inch, those things are like 40 bucks each. So I bought the cheapest length I could find, which was 24 inches, and then I used a cutoff saw to cut it off to length. So there's a tip there if you're trying to manage your budget and the parts you need. If you have a cut-off wheel, that stuff cuts so easy, it's like butter. And the leftover tube that I had, this aluminum or whatever it is nice and soft and pliable. What I did is I cut the circle and created a 1-inch strip that I formed to go through the gap on the this little notch on the styrofoam. And then I taped it down, and then I put the Duramat over it so that like we see right here where the pipe slipped out of the plastic pocket. This is like rock hard, so if this slips in there, it's not going to just push down and compress the foam. I mean, there isn't that much tension on here because there's a lot of weight that's actually being absorbed by the struts, but that's just a little tip where you could cannibalize excess scrap and, you know, add it to the overall fabrication of whatever you're trying to do. So there you have it. That's the shed in its full glory. The next part of this video, we'll have the exhaust hooked up and the sleeve so we could fuel everything up and run it. And we'll run it with the shed open like we see it here. And we'll run it with things starting to close up. And I got a decibel reader that's coming. There's some still pictures accompanied with some narration around hints and tips and close-ups of various components and phases during the shed build-out. The quick tip is to use templates to draw the outlines for your cutouts on the side of the shed. It's a lot easier to hold up a template and do the tracing than it is to hold up the attic fan or the vent louver or the thimble. So just do your tracing on a template. I lucked out, and the packing foam for the attic fan actually glued together foam square protecting the fan louvers. It was a perfect the inner square that you see in this picture was the perfect cut to have the vent fit in darn near perfectly. Here's a picture showing the cutout hole for the exhaust vent. This shows the cutout for the intake vent. Notice how the walls of the shed are double walled and there's hollow cavities in the wall. You need to make sure you seal those up because you do not want insects getting in there because they'll fill up this whole wall if you get ants or wasps or anything else that might be in your region. And here is the extra fireproof foam that I had. I used that to seal it up. You could use regular good stuff foam if you have it as well. Here's another view of the fire foam in the wall space of the thimble hole as well as the attic vent hole. It'll foam up, let it dry. It's real easy to trim with a jigsaw blade. Just do it by hand, or if you have a hacksaw blade, works way better than using a razor blade. You get a nice clean, even cut. Here's where the insulation's installed in the shed. I've got the attic fan bolted in as well, and also put the lid on. You want to put the insulation on the lid later in your project. That way you could let the struts hold the lid up as you're doing your work. Otherwise, if you put the insulation up, you'll need to make your PVC struts to keep the lid up while you're working. Shed with the intake vent installed and the installation trimmed around it. Here's a view of the exhaust fan, the louvered area. You can see the spray foam kind of bubbled out after it dried, easily trimmed up with a hacksaw or hobby saw blade or any kind of saw blade. Much easier to cut through the foam, nice clean cut, way better than a razor. Another view of the louvered attic fan install. This is the 3M fire caulk. Notice how it's tested up to 1,382 degrees. I think at that temperature it actually expands to block fire. We just need it to provide a good seal and protect the resin walls from too much heat. The bug screen kit that I bought, that's actually for RVs. It comes with two 3-inch circular screens, as well as I think it's maybe a 8x10 rectangular screen. You only need one of them for this build, and it fits perfectly into the tip, the finished tip of the trimmed Duravent double within a tube vent. This has been trimmed. Cut out a piece of screen that lays in the full opening, and then I use caulk to cement the screen on top. The extra stainless steel screen acts as like rebar to hold the whole thing together, because RV bug screen is just a little bit smaller in diameter than the actual opening of the tube we're trying to seal up. This is a picture of one of the bug screens that come with the kit. The tip when cutting circular material, use blue tape, painter's tape, to mark off a nice clean edge, and then you could use that as your line to cut through. In this case here, the flex tube, I had to trim off, I don't know, about a foot. You just measure it, because it depends on the size and placement of your generator on how long you want this to be. But any cut-off wheels zip right through this really fast. You could probably do it with a hacksaw, but a cut-off wheel's a lot cleaner cut. Here's a view post-cut of the pipe, and you want to use the finished end, so that the finished end is actually what's going to stick out of the shed with the screen glued or caulked into it. This provides a nice clean look from the outside of the shed as this tube passes through the thimble and then gets caulked into place. This is a cool little tip. In order to get your flex hose and sleeve over the nipple on your generator exhaust, more than likely you'll need to take off the trim cap as well as the bug screen, and also inside of the muffler nipple is going to be a cone-shaped spark arrestor. What I did is I just put them at the very end of the exhaust pipe that's going to be sticking out the side of the shed within the vent pipe. Here's a view of flex hose cut to length with the spark arrestor and finishing tip attached to the end of the exhaust pipe. This is an inside view of the vent pipe going through the thimble. This is overkill, you don't need to do this. I just cut, using stainless steel screen, I cut a circular flange, I guess you could say, out of the screen to butt up against the thimble to keep bugs from crawling through the gap. It's not really needed because we're going to be caulking the outside. I just put it in there since I built it. It's optional. Here's an outside view of the vent pipe through the thimble. What I did is I cut maybe a foot long strip by 5 inches wide of the stainless steel screen, and it coils up. It's got a lot of tension, so you can coil it up into a circle, insert it into the thimble, and it expands. and fills up the gap between the vent pipe and the thimble edges where the flange is. It provides a nice tight seal so there's no play in the vent pipe. Then the screen also acts as rebar, so when you lay in the caulk, this is fireproof caulk, or high temperature caulk, I guess you could say. And I caulked around the thimble flange as well as the opening between the vent and the thimble flange. This is mainly for helping reduce play in the vent pipe and the thimble, but the most important thing is that it seals out bugs and critters from getting into the shed. This is a close-up of the exhaust extension kit that I bought. Notice the inner diameter of the sleeve, that the big thick black area, that inner diameter doesn't fit over the nipple on my muffler. So my dad's going to use the lathe to mill out material so that it'll fit. I give him the outer diameter measure using calipers, so he's going to use that to make it work. Here's a view of my generator's muffler with the shroud removed. You can see the nipple sticking out of the muffler exhaust. You can see this bead weld that goes around to hold that nipple on. The exhaust extension kit comes with a sleeve that's got some pretty nice engineering where they've milled out space so that the sleeve could butt up against the flat area of the muffler, and it covers the weld here. The kit recommends that you weld that sleeve to the muffler. I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to drill a hole through the sleeve and thread that hole as well as the nipple, and actually machine screw the sleeve right to the muffler nipple. It won't come off. If there's any exhaust leaks, I'll either seal it up with J-weld. I'm really not worried about it because it's all going to get sucked out with the exhaust fan anyway, and the shed is not a living space. Here's the extension pipe wrapped in the Teflon exhaust wrap. This will do two things. One is it'll make it safer when you're in the shed if you bump your leg or hand or whatever against the exhaust while the generator's running. It'll reduce the risk of getting burned because this exhaust pipe's going to be pretty hot. It'll be a safety wrap for human skin or animals if they happen to be in there by accident, and it'll also reduce the amount of heat that's radiated into the shed while the engine's running on the generator. Here's a picture of the thickness of the floor mat. This will hopefully help reduce vibration and sound, just provide a better surface for putting down the propane tank and any other items you might want to store in here. Another view of I didn't cut it perfect to length, I could have, but I wanted to leave a little gap around the edges just to allow any water to evaporate so it's not sitting in the foam, because I ran the foam all the way down to the floor.